I've seen a lot of people talking on forums recently who live in countries where firearms are heavily restricted about buying crossbows for defence. And while obviously on this channel I'm never going to encourage anybody to shoot anybody, I'd weigh in or throw in what I know about crossbows to help people, advise them if they were buying something for defence what they'd want to get. So, what we're going to look at is what types of crossbows you can get and what would be the best thing ideally for you. Now, there's not one big clear answer on this, so I'll just show you my opinions on things and you can weigh up for yourself what you want to buy. But obviously there's lots of factors to consider, lots of different crossbows you can get, so we're going to start off obviously talking about what crossbows are better in certain scenarios and what are better in others. Now, crossbows come in two forms, recurve and compound. The crossbow you can see here is a compound. This basically means it has a camshaft system which puts a lot more energy behind a bolt, but at the same time they are much more difficult to repair, they're very difficult to restring, and obviously there's a lot more energy in the crossbow, so a misfire would normally make the crossbow break. So these are, in my opinion, you wouldn't want these in a survival scenario unless you lived in a location where you've got big long lines of sight. Consider this if you want to make a comparison to firearms, although obviously a crossbow is nowhere near as good as a modern firearm for survival situations, but if you need one, then we'll go over it. So this is basically, if I'm to make an analogy, like a sniper rifle. It's got a much longer range than other crossbows and a lot more power, but it's very much overkill for a normal survival situation. You can probably see from there it's fairly long. You can see where the stock and scope is, and then part way down where the handguard is would basically be the full length of a normal sized rifle. So you've got a much longer length to it, and it's heavier and it's quite wide. So it's not really ideal for using in a compact space. Well, no crossbow really is, but this essentially more so. And it's obviously got a lot of power behind it. So you shoot big heavy bolts of this thing. Here's one of them to show you. See, this is a big long aluminium bolt, and basically it's good for long range shooting. A compound crossbow like this is ideal for long range target shooting. So targets in big open fields you can ideally hit with this, but these are harder to reload in my opinion than normal recurve crossbows, and there's more that can go wrong with them. These are great if you're wanting to do shooting as a sport over long distances or large field shooting, or if you did need to hunt over long distances, but they're not ideal when it comes to a lot of other factors. So personally I disregard a compound crossbow for a survival scenario. Next we have a recurve crossbow. This is a very basic model, and I've replaced the limb that was in it with a 40-pound limb. So what this means is it was originally a 120-pound crossbow, which is 120 pounds of weight to draw, and now it's a 40-pound crossbow. I just use this for like outdoor shooting just for fun. This shoots a much smaller bolt than the big crossbow does. Most of my recurve crossbows shoot bolts this size, sort of 13 to 14 inch bolts. You can get longer ones for them. So what's the advantage of a crossbow like this and the disadvantages? Well, a low power draw recurve is very easy to cock. This is one of the things a lot of people tend not to think about initially of crossbows, because you need to put the strength into them to cock them. You can get cocking aids, but really you need to get a crossbow you're comfortable cocking yourself. And so a 40-pound crossbow is very easy to cock. That's like less than 20 kilograms of weight to lift each time you want to cock it. So it means that you can obviously get a lot of shots off quite quickly. It's fast to load, you can load it if you're not physically that strong, and if you've had an injury that won't stop you cocking this one. If you're in a wheelchair for example and you had something to brace the crossbow butt against, such as your shoulder, you could cock this easily. Even if you're in a wheelchair you wouldn't need to use your legs. So that's the advantages of it. However, disadvantages are, because it's not got that much power behind it, while the bolt is still lethal at close range, it loses its power quickly. And while a bolt is still physically travelling, it has the potential to kill, it loses accuracy. The more powerful a crossbow is, the heavier the bolt it can shoot, and obviously the more power behind it, the faster the bolt's going, the more accurate it is. As bolts lose speed, they begin to veer off more, and obviously heavier bolts are affected less by the wind. So that's something to consider. I'd still personally take this over the big crossbow in a survival scenario, unless I was in a fortified position with lots of open ground around it, because this is much faster to load and shoot. So you can, as long as you've got lots of bolts, the accuracy isn't as important, as getting hits on a target. So I'd recommend a low power crossbow more than I would a big compound, but it's still not my preference. Now, out of all the crossbows, this is probably my favourite in terms of power. There's lots of different models you can get by different brands of around this power, but it's a £150 recurve crossbow. So what that means is it takes £150 of weight essentially when it's fully cocked, and this is probably one of the best strengths in crossbows, along with about £120 for trade-off of actual physical effort required to cock it with how fast the bolt will go. So a crossbow of this size can take really anything to 14 to 17 inch bolts, and it can shoot either fiberglass or aluminium bolts. So you can vary the weight depending on how accurate you need it, like what you're punching through. And these, I say these are the best, is generally £150 will give you enough force that you can penetrate through a decent amount of layers. It can go through sheet metal normally, and through wood panelling. Although the £175 compound I have is obviously the best choice for if you want maximum penetration, just because it's got so much power behind the bolt. But this is a very good trade-off. It's more difficult, of course, to cock than the £40 crossbow, but I can do it fairly easily with my foot in the stirrup pulling it. However, as I've said before, you do need to consider how much effort it takes to cock one of these crossbows. When you get used to it and you've built the muscles up, it's not that difficult, but you need to have the right technique to do it. And so often if somebody comes around to shoot my crossbows and they haven't done it before, they will never manage to cock this, even if they should physically be strong enough to do it. So that's a £150 crossbow. Now, this I imagine would be lethal up to ranges of 100 yards or maybe more. But it would lose accuracy at beyond those ranges. Anything up to 30-40 yards it would be very accurate up to, and it's normally quite easy to work out elevation. The higher you shoot, you can work out the angles the bolt will come down at. And this thing is going to be pretty deadly. You would not want to be hit by a £150 crossbow, a bolt leaving it. This goes far enough into a foam boss that you can be sure that a person wearing anything short of body armour, it would go through their clothes, even if it's thick leather, and go far enough into them to be lethal. So £150 crossbow is one of the best trade-offs. And another advantage is a lot of recurves, but not really this model, say with the £40 one I showed you earlier, is you can replace the limbs easily. So you could buy, say, a £150 crossbow with the normal fiberglass limb for £150, then you could put £120, £175 in, £80, £40 limb. Now, obviously you do need to make sure that the crossbow's frame is strong enough to take the extra load that will be on it from a higher poundage, but this should be fine. Now there's one more thing I'll cover, and that's about the difference between these and pistol crossbows, because this also gets brought up. Now, next to the £150 crossbow, there's an £80 pistol crossbow. However, I'm not going to recommend these as they come out the box. There's some really good channels I'm subscribed to that you can find where people have rigged these crossbows up, modified them, and made them a lot more dangerous and a lot more fun. Now, these are good for shooting and practicing your accuracy. They're nice things to play about with. But in all honesty, I don't think these have the penetration power over any sort of distance or the accuracy compared to one of the big rifle crossbows. Now, you get two models of these pistol crossbows typically. This £80 one, which is very good with the self-cocking bit at the back, and you get the £50 ones that are utter crap. The £50 ones normally have this sort of metal thing you pull from behind while pushing the pistol crossbow in the other direction. And while the cocking mechanism isn't too bad, I've had lots and lots of safety concerns with those £50 crossbows, where often the string can come loose or the bolt won't leave it properly. In terms of safety, a £50 crossbow pistol one could still kill somebody, and you have to be very careful with it. So I recommend the £80 one if you're getting a pistol crossbow, just because it's got much better construction and you're not going to injure yourself using it. So, while I wouldn't recommend the pistol crossbows as they are in a survival scenario, if you put enough time and effort into modifying them, you can get the poundage to be much higher behind the little darts. You can put heavier darts in them, like heavier little bolts, which will obviously do more damage. And some people have even modified them with magazines, so you can, keep cocking and shooting them continuously, getting a bolt off every couple of seconds. And that bolt could be a lot more powerful than what this one currently shoots. But out of the box quality, £150 crossbows are definitely my recommendation. They've got the best trade-offs, in my opinion, between how much effort it takes to cock, the sort of time consumption of cocking it, and the distance the bolt will go, and the power behind a bolt. Now, if you look at some of the other videos on my channel, if you're new to it, you'll see just how powerful some of these crossbows can be. It's quite frightening because a lot of these people think they're sort of almost like toys. A bit more dangerous than a toy, but it's just something you can mess about with when they're really not. You need a proper backstop for a crossbow, and the bolt will go very far. So, out of crossbows, that's my recommendation. Go for a £150 crossbow, ideally, with a recurve, and then get one where you can modify the poundage with different limbs, and then get one that suits what you want to use it for. But anyway, that's my summary really of the different crossbows you can get if you were using it in a survival scenario.